Ragnar knelt on the cold stone platform, her wrists and ankles bound in heavy iron restraints. The air was thick with silence, except for the occasional murmur from the crowd gathered in the massive execution hall. Above her, the giant guillotine stood tall, its gleaming silver blade ready to fall. The officials of the Galactic Dominion sat in their high seats, their faces cold and unfeeling. She had been accused of treason, a crime she never committed. The Dominion had claimed that she had conspired against them, but she knew the truth. It was all a lie, a scheme by powerful men who wanted to erase her noble house from history. But in this court, truth did not matter. The High Chancellor, a tall alien with dark red skin and piercing yellow eyes, stood and raised his hand. The hall fell completely silent. Ragnar of House Velkar, his voice echoed, "You have been found guilty of crimes against the Dominion. The punishment is death." The crowd did not cheer, nor did they mourn. They were simply spectators, watching another enemy of the Dominion fall. Ragnar lifted her head, her blue eyes filled with defiance. She refused to show fear. If this was her end, she would meet it with dignity. The executioner, a masked alien in heavy armor, stepped forward and placed his clawed hand on the lever. She closed her eyes. Then, a loud explosion shook the hall. The ground trembled as a blinding flash of light filled the room. Gasps and screams erupted from the crowd. The guards reached for their weapons, but it was too late. A human man in a dark cloak rushed onto the platform. He moved with speed and precision, his hands working quickly as he pulled a small device from his pocket. Before the executioner could react, the guillotine's mechanism sparked and failed. The blade, which was supposed to fall, remained frozen in place. The hall filled with confusion. Ragnar opened her eyes, shocked to see the man standing before her. She had never seen him before. He was tall, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. His face was covered in dust from the explosion, but his expression was calm. "Can you run?" he asked, his voice firm but quiet. For the first time in days, hope flickered inside Ragnar. She nodded. The man reached into his pocket again and tossed a small metallic sphere to the ground. A thick cloud of smoke burst out, covering the entire platform. Coughs and shouts filled the air. The guards, blinded by the smoke, fired their weapons randomly, but the man had already cut Ragnar's restraints with a small plasma knife. "Come on," he said, grabbing her hand. Ragnar didn't hesitate. She followed him, her legs weak from days of imprisonment, but she pushed forward. They ran down the narrow steps of the execution platform, weaving through the panicked crowd. Alarms blared across the hall. The Dominion soldiers shouted orders, but in the chaos, they couldn't see who was an enemy and who was just a frightened spectator. As they reached the main doors, two guards blocked their path, aiming their weapons. "Stop," one of them shouted. The human didn't stop. Instead, he grabbed a fallen staff from the ground and swung it hard, knocking one guard aside. The second guard hesitated for a moment, and that was enough. Ragnar reacted on instinct, kicking the weapon from his hand. The man pulled her through the doorway, and together they ran into the dark streets of the city. The execution hall faded behind them as they disappeared into the shadows. Only then did Ragnar speak. "Who are you?" she asked, breathing heavily. The man glanced at her before leading her into a hidden alley. "Daniel," he said, "and if you want to live, we need to keep moving." Ragnar didn't know why this human had saved her, but one thing was clear: her fate had changed, and she wasn't going to let the Dominion take her life so easily. Ragnar followed Daniel through the dark, winding alleys of the city, her heart pounding in her chest. The cold night air filled her lungs, but she had no time to rest. Behind them, the sounds of alarms echoed through the streets. The Dominion guards were searching for them. "Where are we going?" Ragnar asked, struggling to keep up. Her body was weak from days of imprisonment, but she forced herself to move. "Somewhere safe," Daniel replied, glancing over his shoulder. "But we need to lose the guards first." They turned a corner and entered a narrow passage between two tall buildings. The walls were covered in old metal pipes, and the air smelled of rust and damp stone. Daniel stopped for a moment, pulling a small device from his pocket. He pressed a button, and the device emitted a low beep. "What's that?" Ragnar asked. "A signal blocker," Daniel said. "The Dominion uses tracking drones. This will keep them from finding us for a while." Ragnar nodded, trying to make sense of everything. Just moments ago, she had been ready to accept her fate. Now she was running through the city with a human she had never met before. "Why did you save me?" she finally asked. Daniel gave her a brief look before continuing forward. "Because you were innocent," he said simply. "And because the Dominion wanted you dead for a reason they don't want people to know." Ragnar frowned. "You don't even know me. How can you be sure I'm innocent?" Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. His green eyes were sharp and serious. "I've been investigating the Dominion for a long time," he said. "I know how they work. They silence anyone who stands in their way. You weren't executed because you did something wrong. You were executed because they were afraid of you." Ragnar felt a chill run through her body. Afraid of her? She had always known that the Dominion was ruthless, but she never imagined she was important enough to be a real threat to them. "We need to keep moving," Daniel said, pulling her along. They passed through another alley and entered an old, abandoned marketplace. The stalls were empty, covered in dust and broken signs. Daniel led her toward a hidden doorway between two collapsed buildings. He knocked 3 times in a specific pattern. A small panel slid open, revealing a pair of yellow eyes. "Who is it?" a deep voice asked. "Open up, Ronan," Daniel said. "It's me." The door creaked open, and Daniel pulled Ragnar inside. The room was dimly lit, filled with old furniture and scattered pieces of equipment. Several people stood inside, their faces filled with curiosity and suspicion. "Who's the girl?" A tall man with dark gray skin and short silver hair asked. "Her name is Ragnar," Daniel said. "And she's the reason we might finally have a chance against the Dominion." Ragnar stiffened. "What do you mean?" Daniel sighed and gestured for her to sit. "The Dominion has been corrupt for years," he explained. "But bringing them down isn't easy. We need proof, evidence that they are lying to the people. And you." He paused. "You are the key to that proof." Ragnar stared at him in shock. "Me?" Daniel nodded. "Your family was one of the few noble houses that refused to bow to the Dominion's rule. They saw you as a threat. If we can prove that they framed you, we can expose them." Ragnar's mind raced. She had spent so long believing she had lost everything. Now she had a chance to fight back. She clenched her fists. "What do we do next?" Daniel smiled slightly. "We bring down the Dominion." End of part 2. Ragnar sat in the dimly lit hideout, her mind still spinning from everything Daniel had told her. She had spent days believing she was going to die, but now she had been given a second chance. Still, the weight of his words pressed down on her. Her family had been powerful once, one of the few noble houses that still had influence before the Dominion took full control. But now, they were gone, and she was the last one left. The Dominion had tried to erase her, but Daniel had stopped them. "Are you sure we can fight them?" Ragnar finally asked. She wasn't afraid of the Dominion, but she knew their strength. Daniel sat across from her, cleaning a small energy pistol. "I wouldn't have saved you if I didn't think we had a chance," he said. "But we need to move fast. The Dominion won't stop looking for us." As if to prove his point, a loud beep echoed from the corner of the room. One of the resistance members, a short alien with dark blue skin, rushed to the control panel. His fingers moved quickly over the buttons. "We have a problem," he said, turning toward Daniel. "The Dominion has activated the city's lockdown protocols. They've blocked all major exits, and they've increased patrols in this district." Ragnar tensed. "That means they know we're here." Daniel nodded, standing up. Then we need to leave before they find this place. The resistance members moved quickly, gathering weapons and supplies. The hideout was no longer safe. Daniel grabbed a small bag and handed Ragnar a dark cloak. "Put this on," he said. "We need to blend in." Ragnar pulled the cloak over her shoulders, hiding her face. She wasn't used to running like this, but she had no choice. She followed Daniel out of the hideout and into the dark streets. The city had changed. Bright red warning lights flashed on the buildings, and giant screens showed the face of the High Chancellor. His voice echoed through the streets. "Citizens of the Dominion," he announced, "a dangerous fugitive has escaped execution. Anyone found assisting her will be punished." Ragnar swallowed hard. Seeing her own face on the screens made her realize how serious this was. The Dominion wasn't just hunting her. They were turning the entire city against her. Daniel grabbed her wrist. "Stay close," he whispered. They moved through the crowded streets, keeping their heads down. Soldiers patrolled the area, scanning people with small handheld devices. As they approached a checkpoint, Ragnar felt her heart race. They had to get past without being detected. Daniel pulled her toward a group of merchants carrying large crates. "Walk like you belong," he whispered. Ragnar copied his movements, pretending to be just another traveler. The soldiers barely glanced at them. They were more focused on searching the people who looked nervous. Just as they were about to pass through, a loud voice called out, "Stop!" Ragnar froze. A soldier was pointing at them. Daniel acted fast. He pushed a small button on his wrist device, and suddenly, the lights around them flickered. The power surged, and the scanning devices went offline for a few seconds. "Run!" Daniel shouted. They dashed through the checkpoint, weaving between startled civilians. The soldiers tried to chase them, but the sudden power failure caused chaos. People pushed and shoved, blocking the guards' path. Ragnar followed Daniel into another alley, her breath coming in fast gasps. "How did you do that?" she asked. Daniel grinned. "Let's just say I have a few tricks up my sleeve." Ragnar shook her head, amazed. "So what now?" Daniel's smile faded. "We need to get off this planet," he said. "And I know just the person who can help us." Ragnar and Daniel moved quickly through the dark city streets, avoiding the Dominion patrols. The red warning lights still flashed across the buildings, and the High Chancellor's voice continued to echo through the speakers. The fugitive must be captured at all costs. Any citizen found helping her will be punished. Ragnar clenched her fists. The Dominion was turning the entire planet against her, making it impossible to hide for long. They needed to escape before the noose tightened. Daniel led her into an abandoned storage facility. Inside, a few people were gathered around a table covered with holographic maps and old weapons. A tall, muscular alien with gray skin and glowing orange eyes looked up as they entered. "You're late," he said, his deep voice full of suspicion. "Had some trouble at the checkpoint," Daniel replied. He gestured toward Ragnar. "She's coming with us." The gray-skinned alien frowned. "Daniel, do you even know what you're doing? The whole Dominion is hunting her. If we get caught, we're all finished." Daniel crossed his arms. "We're already finished if we don't fight back, Ronan. She's the key to exposing the Dominion's lies." Ronan studied Ragnar for a moment before sighing. "Fine, but she better be worth the risk." Ragnar stepped forward. "I don't need you to trust me," she said firmly. "I just need a way to get off this planet." Ronan smirked. "I like her. She's got fire." He motioned for them to sit. "All right, listen up. The Dominion controls all spaceports, but there's one way off the planet they haven't blocked yet. A hidden smuggler's route through the old underground tunnels. It leads to a landing zone where a few ships still operate outside Dominion control." Daniel leaned forward. "And you have a ship waiting there?" Ronan nodded. "A small cargo freighter. Not the best, but it'll get you where you need to go." Ragnar glanced at Daniel. "Where exactly are we going?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "To the Central Dominion Archives. That's where we'll find proof of their crimes. Ragnar's eyes widened. That's a suicide mission. The Dominion's most important secrets are kept there. It's one of the most secure places in the galaxy. Daniel gave a small smile. Exactly. That's why they never expect anyone to break in. Ronan let out a low chuckle. You humans are crazy. But I like crazy. So when do we leave? Before Daniel could answer, a loud explosion shook the building. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling. Move, Ronan shouted. The doors burst open as Dominion soldiers stormed inside, their weapons raised. A bright spotlight filled the room, blinding them. There's no escape. A commanding voice rang out. Surrender now, and you will be treated fairly. Daniel grabbed Ragnar's hand and pulled her behind cover. They must have tracked us. Ronan and his men fired back, forcing the soldiers to take cover. Energy blasts lit up the dark room as the battle raged. We need to get to the tunnels, Ronan shouted. Daniel nodded and led Ragnar toward a hidden exit at the back of the building. As they ran, Ragnar heard the Dominion officer yelling orders. Don't let them escape. The High Chancellor wants her alive. Alive. Ragnar's heart pounded. The Dominion had wanted her dead before, but now they needed her alive. Why? She didn't have time to think about it. She and Daniel rushed down a narrow stairway, entering a dark underground passage. The smell of damp earth filled the air as they ran deeper into the tunnels. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew distant, but they weren't safe yet. Daniel turned to her. We don't have much time. If the Dominion wants you alive, that means they're hiding something. Something big, and we're going to find out what it is. Ragnar took a deep breath, pushing down her fear. The Dominion had taken everything from her. Now, it was time to fight back. Ragnar and Daniel ran deeper into the underground tunnels, their footsteps echoing in the dark passage. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and rusted metal. The flickering lights on the tunnel walls barely lit their path, casting long shadows around them. Behind them, distant shouts and heavy footsteps echoed from the entrance. The Dominion soldiers were still searching for them. How much farther? Ragnar asked, trying to keep up with Daniel's fast pace. Not far, Daniel replied. Ronan told me there's a hidden exit that leads to the smugglers' landing zone. We just have to reach it before the Dominion finds us. Ragnar glanced over her shoulder. She could hear the sounds of soldiers moving through the tunnels, their voices getting louder. They're coming, she warned. Daniel pulled out a small device from his pocket and pressed a button. A soft beeping noise filled the air. What is that? Ragnar asked. A distraction, Daniel said. In a few seconds, it's going to send false signals to their scanners, making them think we went in a different direction. Ragnar nodded, impressed. She had always heard that humans were resourceful, and Daniel was proving it to be true. They kept moving, turning through the maze-like tunnels. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Water dripped from the ceiling, and strange mechanical noises echoed from the pipes that lined the walls. After a few minutes, Daniel stopped in front of a metal door. He pressed his hand against a scanner, and the door slid open with a low hiss. This is it, he said. The exit is just ahead. They stepped inside, finding themselves in a large underground chamber. The ceiling was high, with old rusted pipes running along the top. In the center of the room was a heavy metal grate covering the floor. Below it, they could see the faint glow of city lights. Ragnar frowned. How do we get out? Daniel walked over to a control panel on the wall. We open the grate, he said, pressing a few buttons. The grate let out a loud screech as it slowly lifted. A strong gust of wind rushed up from below, carrying the scent of fuel and metal. This leads directly to the smuggler's docks, Daniel explained. We climb down, and we'll be right next to Ronan's ship. Ragnar took a deep breath. She wasn't afraid of heights, but the drop below looked dangerous. Still, they had no choice. Daniel secured a rope to the side of the chamber and tossed it down. I'll go first, he said. Follow me. He slid down the rope with ease, disappearing into the dim light below. Ragnar grabbed the rope and took a deep breath before following him. The wind howled around her as she descended, the city below growing larger with every second. She could see the smuggler's landing zone, a collection of old ships and cargo crates hidden beneath the massive industrial sector of the city. As she neared the bottom, Daniel reached up and helped her down. "We made it," he said. Ragnar barely had time to catch her breath before a loud alarm blared above them. "They found the exit," she said. Daniel cursed under his breath. "Come on, we have to move." They ran toward the landing zone, dodging between cargo crates and rusted machinery. The smuggler's dock was busy, with workers loading supplies onto ships. Ronan was already there, standing near a small freighter. He waved when he saw them. "About time," he called. "Get in." They rushed up the ramp, and Ronan slammed the door shut behind them. "Strap in," he said, moving toward the pilot's seat. "This is going to be rough." As the engines roared to life, Ragnar looked out the window. Dominion ships were already approaching, their weapons aimed at them. Daniel sat beside her, fastening his seatbelt. "Hold on," he said. Ragnar gripped the armrest as the ship lifted off. She knew this was just the beginning. The smuggler's ship shook violently as it lifted off from the landing zone. The engines roared, pushing against the heavy atmosphere. Outside, Dominion patrol ships swarmed toward them like metal vultures, their weapons locking on. Ragnar tightened her seatbelt, her heart pounding. She had escaped the execution platform, fled through the tunnels, and now she was flying straight into battle. Ronan, gripping the ship's controls, muttered under his breath, "They're faster than us, but we got tricks they don't." Daniel leaned forward. "Just get us out of here before they blast us out of the sky." The first enemy shots fired. Bright red laser beams streaked past the ship, barely missing them. The entire vessel shuddered from the shockwaves. "Hold on," Ronan yelled. He yanked the controls, and the ship spun sharply to the right, dodging another incoming blast. Ragnar grabbed the side of her seat. "Can't we shoot back?" Daniel shook his head. "This ship isn't made for combat. We're running, not fighting." Ronan pushed a few buttons on the control panel. "I'm activating the stealth drive. It won't last long, but it might buy us time." A low hum filled the cabin as the ship's exterior shimmered. Within seconds, it vanished from the Dominion's radar. Ragnar glanced out the window. The Dominion ships were still searching, firing blindly into the sky. "Did it work?" she asked. "For now," Ronan said, "but they'll track our energy signature soon. We need to jump to hyperspace before they do." Daniel turned to Ragnar. "We're headed for the Central Dominion archives. That's where we'll find the proof we need." Ragnar frowned. "And what exactly is that proof?" Daniel hesitated, then pulled out a small data chip from his pocket. "Before I rescued you, I intercepted some encrypted Dominion files. They mention your name, but I couldn't decode them. The archives will have the key to unlocking the truth." Ragnar stared at the chip. If her name was in those files, it meant the Dominion had been hiding something about her all along. Before she could ask more, the ship suddenly shook again. A warning alarm blared. "They found us," Ronan cursed. "They must have scanned our heat signature." Dominion fighters closed in, their weapons charging. "We don't have time for a normal jump," Daniel shouted. Ronan gritted his teeth. "Then we're doing a blind jump." Ragnar's eyes widened. "Is that safe?" "No," Ronan said, "but it's better than getting shot down." He slammed his fist on the hyperspace control. The ship's engines roared, and within seconds, everything outside turned into a blur of blue and white light. The sudden jump sent a heavy force through the cabin. Ragnar felt her stomach lurch, and for a moment, she thought the ship might tear apart. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the shaking stopped. The ship was now floating in the calm darkness of deep space. Ronan let out a long breath. "We're alive." Daniel checked the control panel. "Looks like we're far from any Dominion ships. They won't find us right away." Ragnar unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. Her legs were shaky, but she ignored it. So, where did we end up? Ronan frowned at the navigation screen. Somewhere in uncharted space. I'll need a minute to figure out where we are. Daniel turned to Ragnar. While he does that, we need to talk about what's next. Ragnar crossed her arms. You think those files will tell us why the Dominion wanted me dead? Daniel nodded. I do. And if we can prove they framed you, we can turn the entire galaxy against them. Ragnar took a deep breath. She had spent her whole life living under the Dominion's rule, never questioning their power. Now she was on a mission to bring them down. She looked out the window at the endless stars. This was bigger than just her survival. This was a fight for the truth. Ragnar stared out into the endless darkness of space, her mind racing with questions. The Dominion had framed her for crimes she didn't commit, nearly executed her, and now she was on the run with a human and a smuggler. But why? What was so important about her that the Dominion wanted her dead or alive? Daniel placed the small data chip on the ship's control panel. It's time to find out the truth. Ronan, still adjusting their course, glanced over. I hope whatever's in that file is worth all this trouble. Daniel connected the chip to the ship's computer. The screen flickered as lines of encrypted data appeared. This file is locked with high-level Dominion security, he muttered. But I think I can break it. Ragnar watched as he worked, typing commands quickly. How long will it take? Daniel didn't look up. Not long. The Dominion thinks humans are primitive, but they underestimate how clever we are. After a few tense moments, the screen changed. A holographic document appeared, full of Dominion symbols and official seals. Daniel's eyes widened as he scanned the text. Ragnar, this is bigger than we thought. She leaned in, her heart pounding. What does it say? Daniel took a deep breath before reading aloud. You were supposed to be the next High Chancellor. Ragnar's breath caught. What? Daniel continued. Your father was part of the ruling council. He wanted to change the Dominion's laws, give more rights to the people, and stop the endless wars. But the other leaders saw him as a threat. They assassinated him. Ragnar's hands clenched into fists. I was told he died in an accident. Daniel shook his head. It was no accident. After he died, they planned to kill you too, but something stopped them. The High Chancellor himself ordered that you be kept alive, in case they ever needed you. Ronan crossed his arms. Sounds like they needed a scapegoat. Daniel nodded. Exactly. When rebellion started spreading, they needed someone to blame, so they framed you for treason. Ragnar's mind spun. She had spent years believing she was just a soldier, another citizen under Dominion rule. But all along, she had been meant for something greater. They took everything from me, she whispered. My family, my life, all because they were afraid of change. Daniel looked at her. But now, you have the truth. We can expose them. If we broadcast this information to the galaxy, people will turn against the Dominion. Ronan frowned. That's easier said than done. The Dominion controls every major communication network. Daniel smirked. But not all of them. There's a secret transmission station hidden in the Outer Rim. If we get there, we can send this data to every planet in the Dominion. Ragnar nodded. Then that's where we go. Ronan sighed. You really think one message can bring down an empire? Daniel met his gaze. Sometimes, the truth is more powerful than any weapon. Ronan chuckled. All right, human. Let's see if you're right. He adjusted the ship's course. Strap in. We're heading to the Outer Rim. As the ship sped through space, Ragnar felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The ship sped through the vast emptiness of space, heading toward the Outer Rim. Ragnar sat near the control panel, staring at the data chip in Daniel's hand. The truth about her past was now clear. The Dominion had stolen her future, but now she had a chance to fight back. We're almost there, Ronan announced. The transmission station is hidden inside an asteroid field. That's what keeps it safe from the Dominion scanners. Daniel checked the navigation screen. Good. The faster we get there, the better. The Dominion won't sit quietly after we escaped. They'll be searching for us. Ragnar took a deep breath. If we succeed, everything changes. The people will know the truth. Ronan gave a small laugh. If we succeed. First, we have to get past the Dominion forces that are probably waiting for us. Before anyone could respond, a loud alarm rang through the ship. Incoming ships, Daniel shouted. On the screen, 3 Dominion fighters appeared, closing in fast. They must have tracked us, Ragnar said. Ronan cursed under his breath. I told you they don't give up easily. He gripped the controls. Hold on. I'm going to try to lose them in the asteroid field. The ship dived forward, entering the dense field of floating rocks. Giant asteroids spun in all directions, some colliding and shattering into smaller pieces. It was a dangerous place, but it was their only chance. The Dominion fighters followed, their weapons charging. They're locking on, Daniel warned. Ronan pulled the ship into a sharp turn, dodging a massive asteroid. A laser blast flew past, missing them by inches. They're not giving up, Ragnar said, gripping the side of her seat. Ronan gritted his teeth. Then let's give them something to worry about. He pressed a button, and small explosive charges launched from the ship. They attached themselves to nearby asteroids. A second later, they detonated. The shockwave sent several asteroids flying toward the Dominion fighters. One of the enemy ships crashed into a spinning rock, exploding in a bright flash. The other 2 swerved, struggling to regain control. 1 down, 2 to go, Daniel said. Ronan kept flying, weaving through the deadly field. But the Dominion fighters were catching up. They're getting closer, Ragnar said. Daniel suddenly had an idea. What if we used the ship's energy core? Ronan frowned. What do you mean? Daniel quickly explained. If we overload the core for just a few seconds, it will release an energy burst. That could mess with their sensors and give us a chance to escape. Ronan hesitated. That's risky. If we push the core too hard, it could shut down completely. Ragnar made a decision. Do it. It's our only chance. Ronan nodded. All right, hold on. He flipped several switches. The lights inside the ship flickered as the engines roared. A bright pulse of energy exploded outward, spreading through the asteroid field. The Dominion fighters' systems short-circuited. One of them spun out of control, crashing into a large asteroid. The last one struggled, its weapons failing. Now's our chance, Ronan said. He pushed the engines to full power. The ship shot forward, leaving the last Dominion fighter behind. Within seconds, they cleared the asteroid field. Daniel checked the radar. We lost them. Ragnar let out a breath of relief. Good. Now let's get to that station. Ronan pointed ahead. There it is. Through the window, a massive station appeared, hidden inside the shadow of a large asteroid. It was an old structure, but still operational. Ragnar's heart pounded. This was it. The final step. Let's send the truth to the galaxy, she said. The ship docked inside the hidden transmission station. Ragnar, Daniel, and Ronan quickly stepped out, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The station was old, its metal walls rusted, but the lights still flickered, showing that it was operational. Daniel led the way. The main control room should be ahead. If we upload the data here, it'll spread across every Dominion-controlled system. Ragnar tightened her grip on the data chip. Then let's move fast. We don't know how long we have before the Dominion finds us. They reached the control room, filled with ancient consoles and screens. A large central terminal stood at the front, waiting for input. Daniel quickly inserted the data chip. The screen flashed, and rows of encrypted text appeared. It's working. I just need to connect to the main network. Ronan scanned the room. This place seems too quiet. Are you sure no one else is here? Daniel didn't look up. This station was abandoned years ago. The Dominion thought it was useless. That's why we can use it. Ragnar watched as the files loaded. Her father's name appeared on the screen, along with the secret orders that led to his assassination. The evidence of the Dominion's lies, their corruption, and their control over the people, it was all here. She took a deep breath. Send it. Daniel pressed the final command. The transmission began. The station's ancient systems whirred to life, sending the data to every major news network, every underground resistance group, and every public broadcast system. It's going through, Daniel confirmed. In a few minutes, the entire galaxy will know the truth. Ronan smirked. I'd love to see the Dominion's faces when they realize they can't stop this. But just as he spoke, a loud alarm blared. The station's security system had detected something. Guys, Daniel said, looking at the screen. We have a problem. Ragnar turned to him. What is it? Daniel pointed at the radar. A Dominion warship just entered the system. They must have tracked us. Ronan swore under his breath. Looks like they don't want the truth getting out. The station shook as an explosion hit the outer hull. The Dominion had started their attack. Daniel checked the progress bar on the screen. The transmission is at 80%. We just need a little more time. Ragnar looked at Ronan. Can the ship hold them off? Ronan shook his head. We're outgunned. If we try to fight, we won't last long. Another explosion rocked the station. Sparks flew from the ceiling. Daniel clenched his fists. Come on, just a few more seconds. The screen suddenly flashed green. Transmission complete, Daniel shouted. Ragnar didn't have time to celebrate. Then we need to get out of here, now. The three of them ran back to the ship as another explosion shook the station. The walls groaned, and pieces of metal fell from the ceiling. They jumped into the ship, and Ronan quickly started the engines. The docking bay doors were already collapsing as the station took more hits. Hang on, Ronan yelled. The ship shot forward, speeding out of the station just before a final explosion tore it apart. The massive structure crumbled, disappearing into flames and debris. But the transmission was already out. The truth had been sent. As they flew away, Daniel checked the ship's comm system. Reports were already coming in from across the Dominion. Protests were rising. Soldiers were refusing orders. Entire planets were calling for justice. Ragnar stared at the screen. The Dominion had controlled the galaxy for too long. Now, their time was ending. Daniel grinned. We did it. Ronan chuckled. I guess one message really can bring down an empire. Ragnar took a deep breath. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, the people had hope. And hope was stronger than fear.